My father controlled my entire life and stole my paychecks, but when he demanded I pay his $100,000 debt by illegally using my name, I got a restraining order that left them speechless. I'm 24 years old. I work full-time at a restaurant while finishing college, and I need to tell this story because there are still days when I wake up and can't believe I actually managed to get out of that house. I guess I should start from the beginning. Although the truth is, it's hard to know exactly where it all started because for me it was always like that, you know? I always lived under that control and thought it was normal until I started seeing how other families lived and realized something was very wrong. I grew up with Philip and Elizabeth, my parents, and my sister Sarah, who's 2 years younger than me. Philip was, and still is, I guess, a man obsessed with control. I don't know how to explain it better than that. Every aspect of my life was monitored, every decision had to go through him, every minute of my day had to be accounted for. Elizabeth never did anything to stop him. Literally never. When I asked her for help or told her Philip was being too strict, she'd just say things like, "Your father knows what's best," or, "If you listen to him, he wouldn't have to be so hard on you." Basically, she reinforced everything he did. And to this day, I don't understand if she really believed it was okay, or if she was just too scared to contradict him. The rules in my house were absurd. I couldn't go out without explicit permission. And when I say explicit permission, I mean I had to say exactly where I was going, with whom, how long I'd be there, what route I'd take to get there, everything. Philip would call me every 30 minutes when I went out to verify I was where I said I'd be. One time, I arrived 15 minutes late from a friend's house because the bus was delayed, and they grounded me for an entire month. A month. For 15 minutes. I couldn't have social media. Philip said it was a distraction, and only kids without supervision needed it. I couldn't close my bedroom door, not even to change clothes. I had to do my homework at the kitchen table where they could see me, not in my room. The list went on and on. I remember perfectly when I was 14 years old, like 8th grade, and I had made a friend at school named Amy. She was literally just a friend, a girl from my math class who I did homework with sometimes. One day, Philip checked my backpack, because he constantly checked my stuff, and found a note Amy had left me that said something like, "Thanks for helping me with the test, you're the best." That night, he made me sit in the living room and interrogated me for hours about my relationship with this girl. He asked me if I touched her, if I had thought about kissing her, if we were planning to do something inappropriate. I was 14 years old. I literally didn't even understand why he was asking me these questions, but he insisted and insisted until I ended up crying and saying I'd never talk to Amy again just to make him stop. Elizabeth was sitting there nodding her head as if Philip was doing the right thing, as if it was perfectly normal to interrogate your son like that for having a friend. Things continued like that for years. I'd go to school, come straight home, do my homework under supervision, have dinner with the family, and go to sleep. Weekends were the same. I had no social life, no real friends because I could never see them outside of school, and honestly, I started to believe that's how life was supposed to be. Philip always said he was preparing me to be responsible and disciplined, that someday I'd thank him for keeping me on the right path. What he was really doing was destroying any sense of independence or self-confidence I might have had. When I turned 16, I got my first job at a grocery store near the house. I was so excited, because I thought I was finally going to have something that was mine, some independence. Even if it was a part-time job paying minimum wage, bagging groceries and organizing shelves. I told Philip about the job and he said it was fine as long as I didn't affect my grades and I kept up with my responsibilities at home. But it sounded reasonable at the time, I guess. My first day of work was amazing. I met other kids my age. The manager was nice. And at the end of the day, I felt like a real person, with a purpose beyond just existing under Philip's rules. 2 weeks later, I received my first paycheck. It was like $200 or something. Not much, but for me, it was a fortune. I came home excited, showed Philip the check thinking he'd be proud, and he literally took it out of my hands. He told me that since I lived in his house, ate his food, and used his services, my money would contribute to household expenses. He wasn't asking me for part of it. He was taking all of it. I told him it wasn't fair, that I had worked for that money, and he just responded that as long as I lived under his roof, I'd follow his rules. And his rule was that any money coming into the house went to the family fund. Elizabeth backed everything up as, always, saying it was fair and that I should be grateful they let me have a job. Every 2 weeks, the same thing happened. I'd work, receive my check, Philip would take it. He'd give me $20 of allowance from my own money to spend as I wanted, but the rest disappeared. I tried to open my own bank account when I turned 17, but I was a minor and needed a parent on the account, so Philip just made himself a co-holder and had access to everything I deposited. Once I tried to hide $40 in cash that a customer gave me as a tip at the store. I stuffed it in a sock at the bottom of my clothes drawer. Philip searched my room, because of course he did, found the money and punished me for stealing from the family. He made me write a 5-page essay about the importance of honesty and confiscated the money, plus another $20 from my allowance as a fine. Sarah saw all of this and was also fed up. Although she was younger and still completely dependent on them, she'd tell me secretly that when she turned 18 and could leave, she'd do it without thinking twice. That gave me some comfort, knowing it wasn't just me, that she also understood how absurd the whole situation was. Philip and Elizabeth treated her similarly, although she was a girl, so the rules were even stricter in some aspects. I think that made us closer, like it was us against them in a way, although we never said it out loud because it would be too dangerous. I counted the days until my 18th birthday. I literally had a list on my phone marking each day that passed. I had been secretly saving money, asking some regular customers at the store to pay me tips in cash and hiding it in different places. I'd rotate so Philip wouldn't find it. By the time I turned 18, I had like $800. Not much, but enough to get out. I looked for rooms for rent on internet sites, using the public library computers, because I didn't trust using the one at home. I found one like 20 minutes away, by bus. $300 a month, sharing a bathroom with 2 other people, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. The day I turned 18 was a Wednesday. I went to work as usual, came back home, and during dinner I told Philip and Elizabeth I was moving out. The silence that followed was tense, like you could feel the tension in the air. Philip finally spoke and told me it was a bad decision, that I wouldn't be able to support myself, that I'd end up asking for help and crawling back in a month. Elizabeth said, I was being selfish and ungrateful. After everything they'd done for me, I told them I'd already made the decision, and I was leaving that weekend. Philip laughed, literally laughed in my face, and said, go ahead, but don't come crying when you fail. That Saturday I took my stuff, which basically fit in 2 backpacks and a suitcase because I didn't have much, and left. Sarah helped me pack when Philip and Elizabeth weren't looking, crying the whole time saying I'm going to miss me. I promised her I'd come back for her when I could, that I just needed to get established first. The rented room was small, basically a box with a bed, a desk, and a tiny closet. But it was paradise to me. I could close the door, I could go out when I wanted, I could do what I wanted without having to report to anyone. The first few days were strange. Honestly, because I didn't know what to do with so much freedom. I enrolled in the local community college that same semester, paying with student loans and what I could contribute from my work. I got a second job at a restaurant because I needed more money to cover all my expenses. I worked at the grocery store during the day and at the restaurant at night, went to classes when I could, and basically lived on 4 hours of sleep. It was exhausting, but honestly I was happy. Happier than I'd been in years. Nobody told me what to do. Nobody monitored my movements. Nobody checked my stuff. I made real friends at college. I went out with them on weekends when I had free time. And little by little, I started to feel like I was a normal person. Philip and Elizabeth called me occasionally at first, always asking when I was going to come home and admit my mistake. I made it clear to them I wasn't coming back, that I was fine on my own. The calls became less frequent over time, and honestly, I thought they'd finally left me alone. Sarah and I kept in touch. She'd update me on what was happening at the house, and I'd tell her about my new life. She turned 18 like a year after I left, and also moved out. Got an apartment with a friend and started working full-time. We were both out, and it was liberating. Everything was quiet for like 2 years. I was 20 at that point, until one day I received a package at my apartment. It was from Philip. I opened it thinking maybe it was something sentimental. I don't know, maybe an apology letter or something. Instead, inside there was a bunch of papers, like 50 pages of legal documentation, all related to loans and debts. There was a letter from Philip explaining that he and Elizabeth had started a business years ago, something about selling multi-level marketing products or I don't know what, and that the business had failed, leaving them with a debt of almost $100,000. The letter basically said that since I was their son and they had invested so much in raising me, it was my responsibility to help them pay that debt. It included a payment plan where I should contribute $1,000 a month for the next several years. I couldn't believe it. I literally sat there on the floor of my small studio, reading these papers over and over, thinking it had to be a joke. They were asking me, no, demanding, that I pay for their bad financial decisions. They were telling me that everything they'd done for me when I was a child, giving me food and shelter they were legally obligated to give me, now I had to pay for. The worst part is that the documents included my name in some places. Apparently, Philip had put my name as a guarantor or something on some of the loans when I was a minor without my knowledge or consent. I called them immediately. Philip answered, and I told him what the hell was all this, that there was no way I was going to pay their debt. He got furious, yelling that I was an ungrateful son, that they had given me everything and this was the least I could do. Elizabeth took the phone at some point and started with her speech about, you should be grateful, and family helps each other. I told them they were never a real family to me, that they controlled and manipulated me my whole life, and that I didn't owe them anything. Philip took the phone back and threatened me, said he was going to ruin my credit, that he was going to sue me, that he'd make sure I suffered the consequences if I didn't cooperate. I hung up and was left shaking. I didn't know what to do. I called Sarah and told her everything. She told me she'd received the same package. Apparently, Philip and Elizabeth had decided that we were both going to save them from their financial situation. Sarah was just as furious as me. We decided we needed legal help, so I went to the University Legal Services office and talked to a lawyer who helped students for free. I showed him all the documents and he basically told me my parents had no legal grounds, that using my name when I was a minor without my real consent could even be illegal on their part, and that I wasn't obligated to pay any of that debt. The lawyer helped me write a formal letter telling Philip and Elizabeth I wasn't going to contribute to their debt, that any document with my name signed when I was a minor was invalid, and to stop contacting me about it. I sent it by certified mail to have proof they received it. I also set clear boundaries, told them that if they wanted to have any kind of relationship with me in the future, they'd have to respect my decision and stop trying to manipulate or control me. The response was worse than I expected. Philip and Elizabeth started calling me constantly, leaving voicemails full of threats and guilt. They said I was a horrible son, that I was leaving them in ruin, that God was going to punish me for abandoning my family. Elizabeth cried in some messages saying she didn't understand how her son could be so cruel. Philip in other messages was aggressive, saying he was going to show up at my work and at my apartment to force me to talk to them. They started showing up at the restaurant where I worked, causing scenes and demanding to speak with me. My manager had to ask them to leave several times. They'd show up at my building, knock on the door at random hours, yell in the hallway. It was terrifying. Every time I left my apartment, I was afraid of running into them. I stopped going to certain places I knew they knew about. I changed my routes to work and college. Sarah was going through the same thing. They harassed her just the same. We decided we had to do something more drastic. I went back to the lawyer and he helped me apply for a restraining order. I documented all the calls, the messages, the times they showed up uninvited, everything. The judge approved the temporary order and then made it permanent after a hearing where Philip and Elizabeth basically incriminated themselves by admitting everything they'd done, but arguing they were within their rights as parents. The restraining order specified they couldn't contact me directly or indirectly. They couldn't come within 100 meters of me, my work, or my residence. We finally had peace, or at least something close to peace. The calls and messages stopped. They didn't show up again. But the truth is the emotional damage was already done. Years of control and then months of harassment had left their mark. Now I'm 24, like I said at the beginning, and it's been almost 2 years since I got the restraining order. I haven't spoken to Philip or Elizabeth since then, and honestly, I have no desire to. Sometimes I feel guilty. Like I wonder if I should have given them a chance. If I was too harsh cutting off all contact. But then I remember everything that happened, everything they did to me, and everything they tried to do to me after I left. And I know I made the right decision. Sarah is doing well too. She legally changed her last name to completely distance herself from them, which I'm also considering doing. We see each other often, she and I, and honestly we're more family to each other than Philip and Elizabeth ever were to us. My life now is simple, but it's mine. I finished my degree recently, got a better job in administration that pays decently. I moved to a real one-bedroom apartment, not just a studio. I have a stable relationship with someone I met in college who understands my whole past without judging me. I go to therapy every 2 weeks to work on all the trauma from those years of control, and some days are harder than others, honestly, like I still have nightmares sometimes where I'm back in that house, unable to leave, and I wake up with my heart racing until I realize I'm in my own apartment and nobody's controlling me. Last week, I was organizing some old papers and found that first letter I sent them, the copy I had kept. I read it again and was surprised by how firm and clear I was at that moment, considering I was only 20 years old and terrified. I guess in that moment I found a strength I didn't know I had, the strength to finally set boundaries and protect myself. I don't know if Philip and Elizabeth will ever understand the damage they caused. Probably not, but it's not my problem anymore. They made their choices and I made mine. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm actually living, not just surviving under someone else's rules.